Hi, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about 5 things I think are worth watching on Netflix. I feel like there's like so much energy it takes to find a good show to watch on Netflix sometimes, and you really just want someone to take the effort out of it. And so I always find myself watching these kinds of videos to figure out what I should watch, or I just sit there for hours and literally flip through the screens repetitively on my phone before I can project to my TV. So these are the first 5 that I think are worth watching. The first one is Midnight Mass. Like, it was suggested to me on Netflix like a long time ago, and I was like, I don't know what that's about. It looks kind of like scary. Like, I'm not really into horror, you know? So I was like, this is probably not gonna be for me. And then on a whim, I was bored and I put it on, and it was so good. Like, it was surprisingly good. At first I was like, oh, this has like a religious take on, I'm not really into it, but I let it go a little bit longer, and it turned out to be so much more than I had ever expected. So it was about this like small town church that is somewhere near New York, I think. I'm not really sure about the geography of it all, but there's a small island that's only accessible by boat. And this priest goes away and comes back. The priest comes back and he has this thing with him, and then like everything transpires from there. The main point of focus is the church. And so if you have some religious trauma, maybe you wouldn't want to watch it. And it does kind of get it goes on and on and on about, you know, the word of God, but like only anecdotally and only in relation to what's happening in the town. At the end, so many things happen, all hell breaks loose, and it's just so good. I think it's definitely worth a watch if you like vampire-esque religious critique. I think it's really great. I think it also shows like religions coming together, the like tension between different religious groups and how they're kind of all the same. So if you like religious critiques or vampires or both, this is a really good show for you to watch. The second one is Passing. It's a movie. About colorism and racism in New York City. And for me, I feel like it was really good because first of all, I love the actress, the main actress, and she's like one of my favorites. And then secondly, it's like talks about white passing as a tactic of survival. And I think that's something that we don't really think about all too often, like what people sacrifice to be in colorist or white passing relationships, like especially way back then. The film is actually in black and white, so you kind of like are transported into that timeline. I think it's really, really nice. But it's a nice critique and like comparison between like a woman who chooses to white pass and a woman who has the ability to white pass but chooses not to, marries a black man, has black children, lives in Brooklyn. This other woman lives somewhere else in the world, and her husband is white, he's racist, but she has access to all these things. And the black woman just so happens to have status in Brooklyn, like her husband's a doctor and all these different things. And so it's a really nice comparison of 2 people who have the same potential and choose different paths, neither of them good or bad. One just takes more sacrifices than the other. And I think it's a really nice piece, especially given just like some of the racial tensions that we're in right now in America and just across the globe in terms of like what people have to sacrifice to make it and be successful, and what they could do to possibly not have to do that stuff. And then if you choose not to, the consequences of that as well. So it's really good. I'll just wrap it up by saying it's really good, and I think you should watch it. The third one is Clickbait. This one surprised me. I was not expecting to like this show, like even in the slightest. It was not something I would have chosen if I wasn't sleeping at an Airbnb and just had nothing else to do. So the story behind how I figured out the show was I was in Atlanta with my partner, and we were at an Airbnb and we just needed something to do. So we turned the TV on. You know, like at Airbnbs, like people watch all types of shit on Netflix, and like everyone shares an account. Basically, you just put on whatever you want, and you continue on from whatever someone else previous to you arriving watched. And it just so happened to be on the TV on episode 2. So I went back to episode 1 and I watched it, and it just turns out to be so good. Like, it's a mystery, a murder mystery. If you're into true crime, I feel like you would like this, but like less documentary style. It's more like it kind of has bad production in some parts, and the acting also is kind of cringe in some parts, but it's like, I don't know, something about it's got charm, you know, it's got charm. And I stayed for the ending because I watched the first 2 episodes and I was like, okay, I'm not really sure what's going on here. There's so much that could possibly be going on here. I just want to see who actually killed this guy, you know? And you think it's so many different people. And it turns out to be someone you never, ever suspected. So yeah, clickbait is kind of like the game Clue, where you like, it was so-and-so in the freaking library with a candlestick. Like, you know, like it's kind of like got that Clue feel to it, and I like stuff like that. My mom is a true crime fanatic, so I kind of grew up watching those kinds of things, being traumatized, but also learning things. So this is something that I think would be fun if you just like true crime or just are into murder mystery shows like Law and Order or something like that. Another really good one, another social critique, is Maid. To me, it's a critique on American inequality, and it takes place from the perspective of a single mother living in, I think, the Pacific Northwest. That's my guess. I'm not really sure. They talk about it, but I'm not really sure right now. It just sort of follows her life. Like, she is in a relationship that is emotionally abusive. Her life didn't really pan out the way she wanted it to. She ended up married to some guy in a trailer. And I also really like the fact that okay, this is gonna sound kind of strange, but let me explain. I really like the fact that it centers a white woman, because we never see white women in low income situations. We always see white women from a perspective of luxury and grandiosity, like something that's so unattainable, you know what I mean? And so this was sort of like a realistic version of what sort of, for lack of a better word, white trash would look like and how that would happen. So it takes you through this like long journey, and like you figure out that she has generational trauma. She ends up in a battered women's shelter with her child, and it's just like her dealing with all these things and talking about the cycle of abuse and also the cycle of poverty and just so many things, so many like really strong social inequalities that we need to talk about in America and worldwide in general, about just how much wealth inequality equates to people suffering, and sometimes unnecessarily, because they have the money, they have the influence, they have the ability to change lives, and they just choose not to, you know? And this woman was struggling. She wanted to go to college, and she ends up going to college at the end, which that really made me happy, because I'm like, I just need her to win, y'all. I need her to win. And she won. I think she moved out of the town that she lived in, and that's a great first step for her. It's full of ups and downs, highs and lows, and it's just so realistic to like actual life that I loved it as a movie. Definitely worth watching. The last one is Alice in Borderland. And I feel like this is an acquired taste. Like, I feel like Alice in Borderland walked so that Endgame could run. Like, that's really how I feel, because Alice in Borderland took place in Japan. It's got the same feel. Like, they get transported into a game. It's a mind game. You have to like do all these things to get through the next level, and you die, basically. And the only difference between the movie and Endgame was that Alice in Borderland was a movie. I think, actually, no, it was a show. And Endgame was also a show. but they took place in different places, like Japan and Korea. That's literally the only difference between the two of them. And Alice in Borderland, I think, is going to have a season 2. It just hasn't happened yet, but I look forward to it because the ending was so like, oh my god, this conspiracy goes so much deeper. But it's also a key difference between Alice in Borderland and Endgame is that Endgame is so clearly a capitalistic critique of like what rich people do or think about poor people or people who owe debt, and just how far rich people will go to satisfy their needs for fulfillment, because money does not buy happiness and they're just suffering internally. They just don't know who they are without their influence and money or affluence and money. Whereas Alice in Borderland doesn't quite ever tell you who the people are behind the screen doing all of the operating of the game and things like that. You don't know who they are yet. So I'm assuming later on in the series that they're going to give you more answers. But the thing that I like so much about Alice in Borderland is that there's so much suspense. Like, you don't really, like, Endgame had suspense, but you kind of got the answer along the way. Alice in Borderland, you kind of just are watching these people go through this stuff and you're like, what is the point of all of this? And you get to a point where you're like, oh, there is no point. Everyone is different people from different places and there's not a rhyme or reason for why they're chosen. They're just here doing this thing and they have to do it. They don't have a choice. I'm not going to give too much away about the shows because I want you to watch them and I want you to like have a conversation with me in the comments about what you felt about Midnight Mass, how you felt about passing. Maybe it's not relevant to you. I don't know. Clickbait. Is it good? Is it not? Is it terrible acting? All those things could be true. Maid, what did you think about her story in comparison to the book? There's some differences and similarities between the Maid in the book and then Maid as a TV show. And then Alice in Borderland in comparison to the Endgame, like, please. I think Alice in Borderland was better than Endgame. But they're both great in their own right. Like, I think they're both great. I do have some honorable mentions. I have 3 of them are animes because I love anime, but I can also do another top 5 animes you should watch if you want. I have Kakakuri, which is a show about like gambling, and it's just super over sexualized and like it's doing the most, but I love it. My favorite character is the girl with the eye patch. She's just sadistic and I love it. I don't know why. I just think it's so interesting when they have characters who like love pain and just like going the extra mile for no reason. You're like, why are you like this? Aggretsuko, which again is just an anime that I love. It has a special place in my heart because it takes place in Tokyo. I discovered it while I was living in New York City, and I just had so many parallels between the character in the show and me in real life. So Aggrestsuko is one of my favorite animes. Beastars, because it's strangely fun and it's strangely good. And that's all I'm gonna say about that one. And the fourth one, is The Harder They Fall. It wasn't my favorite my favorite movie on Netflix, but it was worth watching. The only critique that I would give it is that like it didn't keep my attention. I had to watch it in spurts and I didn't even finish it then. So the actors themselves were really great in their individual roles, but it just sort of felt all over the place and there wasn't like a rhyme or reason for why anything was happening. But it was a good representation of Black cowboys, which I thought was great because I'm a Texan and I love cowboys and I've always known that Black cowboys exist. So to see them represented in media, it's just great. And the last one I have is Midnight Gospel. Midnight Gospels is fucking great. Like, if you like anything that has to do with like Steven Universe, Adventure Time, even like those types of shows, you would definitely like Midnight Gospel. Or Disenchanted even, really good. Midnight Gospel is mostly a podcast that has been animated. And the animation and the podcast itself have literally nothing to do with each other at first glance. But then you're like, oh, well, maybe there's a parallel between the conversation that's taking place and the stuff that's going on, but it's like sensory overload almost, and you're just like, what is happening? And it's like, it's so good. And the guy with the hat, he's my favorite guy. You gotta like him. He's doing all these things, going to all these universes, having these really in-depth conversations about social issues that somehow are existing everywhere in this freaking stratosphere. You're just like, how did you transport from here to there? And it's just like beautiful. Anyway, those are my favorite honorable mentions. The top 5 again were Midnight Mass, Passing, Clickbait, Maid, and Alice in Borderland. If you have watched any of these shows and you love them or hate them, let me know in the comments. If you have shows that you think I should watch and critique, let me know in the comments. I'm really trying to build some kind of community here, so just let me know what you think. See you next time.